The evening air hung heavy with memory inside the Arlington Military Museum. Outside, rain tapped against the tall windows like distant artillery, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Five men sat in a semicircle, their weathered faces illuminated by the soft glow of track lighting. They wore civilian clothes now, but their postures betrayed decades in uniform. At the center, a tall figure with silver hair rose slowly, his hand resting on a glass case containing a tattered American flag. Colonel Jack Donovan, United States Army, retired, stood before the group. At 67, his frame remained imposing despite the slight stoop in his shoulders. Deep lines carved paths across his face, each one earned through years of command and conflict. His eyes, however, remained sharp and clear, the same eyes that had peered through dust storms and gun smoke 34 years earlier in the Iraqi desert. "You asked about Desert Storm," he began, his voice resonant, yet tinged with the gravel of age. "About what happened at Al Bergen. The official record says our unit encountered enemy armor and prevailed against superior numbers." He paused, running his finger along the edge of the display case. But official records rarely tell the whole story. The gathered veterans leaned forward, almost in unison. They knew that tone. It was the voice of a man about to share a truth few had heard. "What I'm about to tell you never made it into any military report. Some parts were classified, others simply too personal for the Pentagon's filing cabinets." Donovan's gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window. It was February 26, 1991, the sixth day of the ground war. The museum around them seemed to fade as Donovan spoke, his words painting images more vivid than any exhibit could display. The desert air shimmered with heat despite the winter season. Fine particles of sand drifted across the horizon, blurring the boundary between earth and sky into an endless tan canvas. Captain Jack Donovan stood atop his M1A1 Abrams tank, scanning the terrain through binoculars. At 43, he was older than most officers of his rank, his promotion trajectory slowed by his tendency to speak his mind regardless of audience. His desert camouflage uniform was stained dark with sweat and around the collar and underarms, his face weathered by sun and wind. "Thunder 6 to Thunder units. Radio check over." Donovan's voice carried the distinct accent of rural Pennsylvania, clipped and efficient from years of military communications. "Thunder 6, this is Thunder 1, Lima Charlie over." The responses came in sequence from the other tanks in his unit, each confirming clear communications. Donovan lowered himself into the commander's hatch, the familiar smell of steel, oil, and sweat greeting him. This M1A1 Abrams, hull number A2 Amphibious, nicknamed Iron Resolve, had been his mobile home and command post for the past 7 months. The interior space was cramped but meticulously organized, every control and instrument precisely where it needed to be. "Bull, how's our ammunition count looking?" Donovan asked, addressing his gunner. Sergeant First Class William Bull Thompson turned from his gunner's station, his dark skin glistening with perspiration. At 38, Bull was a veteran tanker who had served alongside Donovan in multiple deployments. Their connection ran deeper than most. Bull had served with Donovan's father in Vietnam before Jack had even enlisted. 22 sabot rounds, 18 heat, 12 canister, sir. Full load of cokes and 50 cal. Bull's deep voice carried the smooth cadence of Louisiana. "Whatever they send our way, we're ready to send back with interest." Donovan nodded, his hand instinctively brushing against the faded photograph taped beside his station. It showed a younger man in Vietnam-era fatigues, Captain Thomas Donovan, his father, standing proudly beside his own tank. The elder Donovan never made it home from Southeast Asia, killed during an ambush near Khe Sanh. Jack had been just 12 years old. "Captain, incoming transmission from battalion," called Specialist David Chen from the loader's position. At 28, Chen was the intellectual of the crew, a former engineering student who had enlisted after his family fell on hard times. His wife had given birth to their first child just 2 weeks before deployment, a daughter Chen had only seen in photographs. "Patch it through," Donovan ordered, settling into his commander's seat and adjusting his headset. "Thunder 6, this is Warhorse Actual. Priority message, acknowledge." The clipped voice of Lieutenant Colonel Morris crackled through the radio. "Warhorse Actual, Thunder 6, acknowledged and standing by. Thunder 6, report to command post immediately for mission briefing. Eyes only. Acknowledge." Donovan's brow furrowed. Eyes only meant highly classified information, typically reserved for special operations. "Acknowledged, Warhorse Actual, ETA 15 minutes. Donovan turned to his driver, Sergeant Ray Martinez, a 32-year-old third-generation soldier from El Paso. "Ray, take us back to the CP. Expedite." "You got it, Captain," Martinez replied, his hands moving deftly over the controls. The massive 70-ton vehicle responded like a creature awakening, its turbine engine roaring to life with a high-pitched whine that gradually deepened into a thunderous growl. As they traveled back to the command post, Donovan studied the terrain. The vast Iraqi desert seemed endless, but his trained eye noted every ridge, wadi, and depression, potential cover, ambush points, or fighting positions. This harsh landscape would soon become their battlefield, and knowing it intimately could mean the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death. The command post was a cluster of camouflage netting stretched over Humvees and communication equipment. Armed guards stood at attention as Donovan approached, their expressions hidden behind tinted goggles and dust masks. Inside the makeshift structure, air conditioners fought a losing battle against the desert heat. Lieutenant Colonel Morris stood hunched over a map table, his finger tracing lines across the terrain. At 50, Morris was a career officer with a reputation for meticulous planning and by-the-book operations. He looked up as Donovan entered, his expression grave. "Captain Donovan, good timing." Morris gestured to the only other man in the room. "I believe you know Colonel Westfield from intelligence." The tall, thin man in immaculate desert fatigues nodded curtly. Donovan had encountered Westfield once before, during a classified briefing in Saudi Arabia weeks earlier. The intelligence officer had the bloodless appearance of someone who spent most of his life in air-conditioned rooms studying satellite imagery and signals intercepts. "Gentlemen, what I'm about to share is classified top secret," Westfield began without preamble, his voice carrying the refined accent of old money and Ivy League education. "Satellite reconnaissance has identified a concentration of Iraqi armor approximately 70 kilometers northwest of our position." He unfolded a series of grainy photographs across the map table. The images showed the distinctive shapes of tanks and armored personnel carriers concealed among rock formations and ravines. "This is the 10th Armored Brigade of the Republican Guard, elite troops equipped with modified T-72 tanks. Intel suggests they're positioning for a counterattack against our forward operating bases." Donovan studied the images intently. "With respect, sir, our air superiority should make any major armor movement suicide for them." Westfield's thin lips formed what might generously be called a smile. "Should, yes, but there's a sandstorm front moving in from the northwest. Our aircraft will be grounded for at least 36 hours. The Iraqis know this. They've chosen their moment well." "What's the plan?" Donovan asked, already calculating distances and fuel requirements in his head. Lieutenant Colonel Morris straightened up. "We need eyes on the ground, Captain. Intelligence requires confirmation of enemy strength and movement vectors before committing to a major defensive redeployment." "You want a reconnaissance mission," Donovan stated. "Not just reconnaissance," Westfield interjected. "We need your team to slip behind their lines, gather intelligence on their composition and intent, and if possible, disrupt their communication and supply lines." Donovan's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced. "Sir, with all due respect, that sounds like a job for Special Forces, not an armor unit." "Special Forces are otherwise engaged," Morris replied, his tone making it clear that details would not be forthcoming. "Besides, your tank platoon has the best combat record in the battalion. 4 confirmed kills already, no casualties, exceptional teamwork." "There's more," Westfield added, sliding a manila folder across the table. "The Iraqi force is commanded by Colonel Hakim al-Rashid." The name hit Donovan like a physical blow. His hand froze halfway to the folder. "I see you recognize the name," Westfield noted, watching Donovan's reaction with clinical interest. "Yes, sir." Donovan's voice remained professional despite the sudden tightness in his chest. "We attended West Point together, class of '76. What Donovan didn't add was that Hakim al-Rashid had once been his closest friend. An Iraqi exchange student of exceptional talent, al-Rashid had been brilliant in tactics and strategy. They had spent countless hours debating military theory, pushing each other to excel, forming a bond that transcended their different backgrounds. After graduation, they had maintained correspondence for several years, until Iraq's political climate changed dramatically under Saddam Hussein's increasingly dictatorial rule. "Then you're aware of his capabilities," Morris said. "Al-Rashid is considered one of Iraq's most dangerous battlefield commanders. He understands American tactics, equipment, and doctrine. That makes him an exceptional threat." Donovan nodded slowly. "What exactly is the mission parameter, sir?" Your platoon will move out tonight under cover of darkness, Morris explained, indicating routes on the map. You'll establish observation posts here, here, and here. Gather intelligence on force composition, movement patterns, and if possible, their intended targets. And if we're compromised, Donovan asked. Standard ROE applies, Morris replied. Defend yourselves as necessary, but primary mission is intelligence gathering, not engagement. Westfield's cold eyes fixed on Donovan. There's another aspect to this mission, Captain. Intelligence suggests that al-Rashid has been developing modified battle tactics specifically designed to counter our Abrams tanks. Any information you can gather on these tactics would be invaluable. Donovan absorbed the information, his mind already formulating plans, contingencies, escape routes. When do we move out? 2,200 hours, Morris answered. Nightfall should provide adequate cover for initial movement. You'll have 4 tanks, your own plus 3 others from your platoon. Choose your best crews. Yes, sir. Donovan gathered the intelligence materials, tucking them into his map case. As he turned to leave, Westfield spoke again. One more thing, Captain. Our intelligence indicates that al-Rashid has been asking about you specifically. Intercepted communications show he's aware you're commanding tanks in this sector. Donovan paused at the entrance. He always was thorough in his reconnaissance, sir. Outside the command tent, the desert sun beat down mercilessly. Donovan stood for a moment, allowing his eyes to readjust to the glare. The mission ahead would be dangerous enough without the personal complications. Al-Rashid, after all these years. A memory surfaced unbidden, West Point, spring of 1975. They had been jogging along the Hudson River, discussing their futures. You Americans, Al-Rashid had said, laughing between breaths. You think war is a science. In my country, it is an art form passed down through generations. Science, art, doesn't matter what you call it, Donovan had replied. The objective remains the same. Achieve your mission while preserving your forces. Al-Rashid had stopped then, suddenly serious. And what if our missions ever place us on opposite sides, my friend? Donovan had dismissed the idea. Not going to happen. Iraq and America have common interests. Politics changes faster than desert sands, Jack. Promise me something. If we ever face each other in battle, we will remember we were brothers first. Donovan had agreed, never imagining the promise would be tested. Now, standing in the Iraqi desert, that conversation seemed like a prophecy. Donovan pushed the memory aside and headed back to his tank. There was no time for nostalgia when lives depended on his focus and judgment. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon as Donovan returned to his unit. The 4 Abrams tanks sat in defensive formation, their massive hulls creating long shadows across the sand. Each was a marvel of American engineering, 70 tons of armor and firepower, capable of destroying targets over 2 miles away while moving at 45 miles per hour across rough terrain. Against most adversaries, they were nearly invincible. But Donovan knew that al-Rashid would have studied their vulnerabilities. The Iraqi commander would know that even the mighty Abrams had weaknesses, limited visibility to the rear, fuel consumption issues, the gap between the turret and the hull that could, in theory, be exploited. Gather round, Donovan called to his assembled tank commanders. Lieutenant Parker, Staff Sergeant Wilson, and Sergeant First Class Rodriguez approached, their expressions curious. All were experienced tankers, men Donovan trusted with his life. We have new orders, Donovan began, keeping his voice low despite the unlikelihood of being overheard. Reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines, high risk, high priority. I need your best crews, full ammunition, and maximum fuel load. We move out at 2,200 hours. Sir, recon in tanks? Lieutenant Parker asked, voicing the obvious concern. Aren't we a bit conspicuous for that? Can't argue with that, Parker. But orders are orders. We'll use terrain masking and night movement to minimize detection risk. Donovan spread a map across the hood of a nearby Humvee. Our objective is to gather intelligence on a Republican Guard armor unit operating in this area. They're positioning for a possible counterattack against our forward bases. Republican Guard, Rodriguez muttered. Those boys actually know which end of a tank fires the bullets. Their commander certainly does, Donovan replied grimly. Colonel Hakeem al-Rashid, one of Saddam's most capable officers. West Point graduate, ironically enough. He knows our playbook. The gathered officers exchanged glances. American-trained enemy commanders were rare and especially dangerous. Any questions before we prepare? Donovan asked. Extraction plan if things go sideways? Wilson inquired, always the pragmatist. We fight our way out if necessary. Head due east to reach friendly lines. Air support will be limited due to an incoming sandstorm, so we're largely on our own. Donovan folded the map decisively. Prepare your crews. Full combat load. Night vision checked and double-checked. Briefing at 2100, rollout at 2200. As the officers dispersed to their tasks, Bull Thompson approached Donovan privately. You know this Al-Rashid character, don't you? I can see it in your face. Donovan nodded slightly. We were friends once, a lifetime ago. Bull's expression remained unreadable. Friend or not, he's shooting at our boys now. I'm aware of that, Sergeant, Donovan replied, perhaps more sharply than intended. Just making sure, Bull said quietly, because battlefield hesitation gets people killed. There won't be any hesitation, Donovan assured him, though the tightness in his chest suggested otherwise. As preparations continued around him, Donovan found a moment of privacy beside his tank. He retrieved the satellite phone from its case and dialed a number he knew by heart. After several rings, a teenage boy's voice answered. Hello? Michael, it's Dad. There was a pause on the line. Hey, Dad, you okay? I'm fine, just checking in. How's school? Donovan tried to sound casual, aware that military censors would be reviewing all calls. It's whatever. Coach says I might start next game. Michael's voice carried the practiced indifference of adolescence, but Donovan could detect the underlying pride. That's great, son. Really great. Your jump shot improving? Yeah, I've been practicing like you said. Uncle Dave's been helping me. The mention of his brother Dave brought a complicated mixture of emotions. Dave had always opposed military intervention in the Middle East, creating a rift between the brothers that had only widened when Donovan deployed. Tell him I said thanks, Donovan managed. Listen, Michael, I'm heading out on assignment for a few days. Might not be able to call. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Michael had grown up with such announcements, each one carrying the unspoken possibility that it might be their final conversation. Be careful, okay? Michael finally said, his teenage facade cracking slightly. Always am. I've got the best crew in the Army watching my back. Donovan paused, words suddenly inadequate. I'm proud of you, son, more than you know. Dad, is it bad where you're going? Donovan closed his eyes briefly. It's just a routine mission, nothing to worry about. That's what Grandpa told Grandma before he went to Quezon. The comparison landed like a physical blow. Michael had never met his grandfather, but the stories and photographs had made Thomas Donovan a powerful presence in the boy's life, and a specter that haunted Jack's every deployment. This is different, Donovan insisted. I promised I'd come home and I will. Have I ever broken a promise to you? No, sir, Michael answered, the military courtesy slipping in unconsciously. I love you, son. I'll call when I can. Love you too, Dad. The connection ended, leaving Donovan staring at the handset, the vast distance between them suddenly unbearable. He carefully returned the phone to its case and straightened his shoulders. Personal concerns would have to wait. His men needed a commander fully present and focused on the mission ahead. The preparations continued as the sun sank below the horizon. Each tank underwent rigorous checks: engines, weapon systems, communications equipment, night vision devices. Additional fuel and ammunition were loaded. Maps were studied, contingency plans established, rally points memorized. Inside the commander's compartment of iron resolve, Donovan conducted his own inspection. His fingers moved methodically over gauges and controls, following the same routine he had established years ago. Routine bred familiarity, and familiarity bred confidence, essential qualities for what lay ahead. Captain, Chen called from the loader's position, mail came in while you were at the briefing. He handed over a small package wrapped in brown paper. Donovan recognized his brother's handwriting on the label. Dave had maintained their correspondence despite their political differences, a testament to family bonds that transcended ideological divides. Opening the package, Donovan found a cassette tape and a brief note. Jack, thought you might need some decent music out there in the sandbox. Stay safe, we need you back home. Dave. The simple words carried an olive branch Donovan hadn't expected. He tucked the tape into his personal effects pouch, making a mental note to listen to it when they returned from the mission. If they returned. All systems operational, Captain, Martinez reported from the driver's station. Fuel tanks topped off, engine running at optimal temperature. Weapon systems fully functional, Bull added. Primary sight calibrated, auxiliary sight aligned, gun tube bore-sighted. Communications check complete, Chen confirmed. All frequencies programmed, crypto loaded and synchronized. Donovan nodded his approval. Outstanding work, gentlemen. This mission is classified, but you deserve to know what we're facing. He outlined the basic parameters: reconnaissance behind enemy lines, intelligence gathering on Republican Guard movements, minimal engagement unless necessary. One more thing, he added. The enemy commander is someone I know personally. We trained together at West Point. The three crew members exchanged glances. That going to be a problem, sir? Bull asked directly. No, Donovan replied firmly. It changes nothing about our mission or how we execute it. I'm telling you only so you understand we're up against someone who knows American tactics and equipment intimately. Bull held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Roger that, sir. At 2100 hours, Donovan conducted the final mission briefing with all four tank crews. The night had brought a chill to the desert air, and the men gathered in a tight circle, speaking in hushed tones despite their isolation. Our route takes us through these wadis to minimize our profile, Donovan explained, indicating dry riverbeds on the map. We'll maintain radio silence except for emergencies. Communication will be by visual signals when possible. He continued through the details: observation positions, intelligence requirements, emergency extraction routes, recognition signals for friendly forces. The men listened intently, asking pointed questions that revealed their experience and professionalism. Intelligence suggests minimal enemy presence along our approach route, but we proceed with caution. This is Republican Guard territory. These aren't the conscripts we've faced so far. Donovan's gaze moved from face to face. Any questions? Lieutenant Parker raised his hand. Rules of engagement, sir? We are authorized to defend ourselves if detected. Primary mission remains intelligence gathering, not engagement. We avoid contact unless absolutely necessary. The men nodded their understanding. They had all seen combat in the preceding days, but this mission was different. Deeper into enemy territory, without the usual support structure, facing elite enemy forces. One last thing, Donovan said, his voice growing solemn. I know each of you has performed exceptionally throughout this campaign. That's why you were selected. This mission carries strategic importance beyond its tactical objectives. What we learn could save hundreds, perhaps thousands of American lives if the Iraqis are indeed planning a major counteroffensive. He paused, looking each man in the eye. I have complete confidence in your abilities. We move out in 1 hour. Check your equipment, say your prayers, do whatever you need to do to be ready. As the group dispersed, Donovan felt the familiar pre-mission tension building in his chest. Not fear exactly, but an acute awareness of mortality and responsibility. Each man under his command had a family waiting for their return. Each had dreams and plans for life after the war. His decisions in the coming hours would determine whether those dreams had a chance to materialize. Back at his tank, Donovan found Bull Thompson sitting alone on the turret, cleaning his personal sidearm with methodical precision. Something on your mind, Sergeant? Donovan asked, climbing up beside him. Bull continued his work for a moment before responding. Thinking about your old man, sir. The statement caught Donovan off guard. My father? What about him? I served with Captain Thomas Donovan for 11 months in Vietnam. Did I ever tell you what he said to me before that last patrol? Donovan shook his head slowly. Bull rarely spoke about his time with the elder Donovan, and Jack had never pressed him for details. He showed me your picture. You were just a kid then, maybe 12. He said, Bull, if anything happens to me, my boy will need guidance someday. He'll follow me into this man's army, sure as sunrise. When he does, you look out for him. Bull's hands paused their movement. Took me 20 years to make good on that promise. Donovan felt a tightness in his throat. You never told me that. Never seemed the right time. Bull reassembled his pistol with practiced ease. Your old man was the finest tank commander I ever served under. Until you. High praise, Donovan managed, unsure how to respond to the unexpected sentiment. Not praise, sir, just facts. Bull holstered his weapon. Whatever happens out there tonight, I want you to know I've kept my promise to your father. Donovan extended his hand and Bull shook it firmly. No further words were necessary between men who had faced death together more times than either cared to count. At precisely 2200 hours, the 4 Abrams tanks moved out in single file, their massive forms silhouetted briefly against the night sky before descending into a wadi that would conceal their approach. Donovan led in iron resolve, followed by Parker, Rodriguez, and Wilson. Night vision devices transformed the darkness into an eerie green landscape, revealing terrain features invisible to the naked eye. The tanks moved more quietly than their size would suggest, their turbine engines producing a distinctive but less obtrusive sound than conventional diesel power plants. Still, sound carried far in the desert night, and Donovan ordered a slow pace to minimize noise signature. Inside Iron Resolve, the crew worked with minimal conversation. Martinez navigated the challenging terrain with impressive skill, guiding the 70-ton vehicle through narrow passages where there seemed barely enough clearance. Bull continuously scanned for threats through thermal sights that could detect the heat signature of enemy vehicles or personnel. Chen monitored communications and remained ready to load the main gun at a moment's notice. Donovan divided his attention between the terrain ahead and the map, confirming their position regularly against identifiable landmarks. The Iraqi desert was deceptive, seemingly featureless at first glance, but actually filled with subtle variations that could disorient even experienced navigators. 2 hours into their journey, they reached the first potential danger zone, a known Iraqi patrol route. Donovan signaled a halt, and the four tanks took up defensive positions in the shadow of a rocky outcropping. For 15 tense minutes, they waited in silence, scanning for any sign of enemy activity. Movement 2 o'clock, approximately 800 meters, Bull reported quietly, his eye pressed to the thermal sight. Donovan shifted to look through his own optics. The thermal image showed 3 distinct heat signatures moving from right to left across their front, the unmistakable profile of Soviet-built BMP infantry fighting vehicles. "Hold position," Donovan ordered via the platoon radio, keeping his voice just above a whisper despite the impossibility of being overheard at that distance. "Let them pass." The Iraqi patrol continued on its route, unaware of the American tanks watching from the darkness. Once they had disappeared from view, Donovan gave the signal to resume movement. The night deepened as they pressed further into enemy territory. The moon rose, casting silver light across the desert landscape. Donovan checked his watch, 0130 hours. They were approaching their first planned observation point, a ridgeline overlooking a major supply route reportedly used by the Republican Guard. As they climbed a gentle slope toward the ridge, Martinez suddenly tensed at his controls. "Captain, I'm seeing lights ahead. Multiple vehicles." Donovan peered through his vision blocks. In the distance, a convoy of trucks was moving along the road below the ridge, their headlights cutting through the darkness. "Pull back 50 meters and establish hull-down positions," Donovan ordered. This could be the supply convoy intelligence mentioned. The four tanks reversed carefully, positioning themselves so that only their turrets were exposed above the ridgeline. Through their thermal sights, they could observe the convoy without being easily detected. "I count 12 trucks, 4 escort vehicles," Bull reported. "Looks like supply transport, not combat units." Donovan studied the convoy through high-powered optics. The trucks appeared to be carrying ammunition crates and fuel containers, critical supplies for an armored force preparing for offensive operations. "Parker, maintain observation of the convoy. Record vehicle types, cargo estimates, heading, and speed," Donovan instructed over the radio. "The rest of us will continue to the next observation point. Rendezvous at checkpoint Delta at 400 hours." Parker acknowledged the order, and his tanks settled into position while the other three continued their mission. The next phase of their route took them through increasingly difficult terrain, a maze of small ravines and rocky outcroppings that forced them to move slowly and carefully. Martinez demonstrated exceptional skill, guiding Iron Resolve through passages that seemed too narrow for the massive vehicle. As they navigated this challenging landscape, Donovan's thoughts turned again to Hakim al-Rashid. During their time at West Point, they had often discussed desert warfare and the advantages of terrain masking. Al-Rashid had a particular fascination with historical desert campaigns, from Alexander the Great to Rommel's Africa Corps. He would recognize the routes American forces might take, the positions they might occupy. "Sir," Chen's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I'm picking up radio transmissions, Arabic language, military frequencies." Donovan tensed. "Can you pinpoint the source?" "Negative, sir. Signal is scattered. Could be reflections off the terrain." "Record everything," Donovan ordered. "Intelligence will want to analyze it later." They continued forward with heightened caution, aware that enemy forces might be operating nearby. The terrain began to open up as they approached their second observation point, a plateau overlooking a suspected Republican Guard assembly area. What they found there exceeded all intelligence estimates. The valley below was filled with Iraqi armor, dozens of T-72 tanks arranged in precise formations, along with armored personnel carriers, mobile anti-aircraft systems, and artillery pieces. It was not merely a battalion as intelligence had suggested, but what appeared to be an entire brigade combat team, perhaps 800 to 1,000 men with over 100 armored vehicles. My God, Bull whispered, his eye pressed to the thermal sight. That's a full-scale attack force. Donovan felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. This was no defensive positioning. The Republican Guard was preparing for a major offensive operation against American forces. If they managed to launch a surprise attack during the sandstorm when air support was grounded, the results could be devastating. Chen, prepare a priority flash message to headquarters. Include estimated force composition and coordinates. Donovan continued to study the enemy formation, noting the precise arrangement that spoke of exceptional leadership and discipline. This was al-Rashid's work. The Iraqi commander was preparing his forces with the methodical thoroughness Donovan remembered from their academy days. As Chen drafted the message, a flicker of movement caught Donovan's attention. A small group of vehicles separating from the main force, heading in their general direction. Contact possible enemy patrol, Donovan warned. All tanks, reverse to covered positions. The three Abrams began a careful withdrawal, backing down from the exposed plateau toward the protection of nearby rock formations. They had almost reached cover when disaster struck. Rodriguez's tank, moving in reverse over unfamiliar terrain, slipped into a shallow depression. The sudden movement dislodged several large rocks, which clattered noisily down the slope. In the quiet desert night, the sound carried like a thunderclap. Possible compromise, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight. Engine strain indicator lit up. May have thrown a track. Bull, eyes on that patrol, Donovan ordered. Martinez, bring us into supporting position. Chen, get that message transmitted now, then prepare for possible engagement. Through his optics, Donovan could see the Iraqi patrol had stopped, apparently alerted by the noise. After a brief pause, they began moving directly toward the American position, their pace accelerating. They've spotted us, Bull confirmed. 3 BMPs and what looks like a command vehicle, range 1,200 meters in closing. Donovan faced an immediate tactical decision. Engage the patrol and reveal their presence definitively, or attempt to evade and preserve the reconnaissance mission. The choice vanished when a bright flash erupted from one of the BMPs, followed by the distinctive trail of an anti-tank missile streaking toward Rodriguez's disabled tank. Incoming, Donovan shouted. Return fire, all tanks. Bull didn't need to be told twice. His hands moved with practiced precision, acquiring the lead BMP in his sights and squeezing the trigger. The Abrams shuddered as its 120mm main gun fired, the round covering the distance to the target in a fraction of a second. The BMP erupted in a fireball that momentarily turned night into day. The battle had begun. Whatever element of surprise they had possessed was now gone, and the full weight of the Republican Guard force might soon be bearing down upon them. Donovan knew they had only minutes to transmit their intelligence and find a way out of the death trap they now occupied. In the commander's seat of iron and resolve, Jack Donovan felt the familiar clarity of combat focus descend upon him. The next few minutes would determine not only their survival, but potentially the outcome of a major battle to come. Somewhere in the valley below, his old friend Hakim al-Rashid would be receiving reports of contact with the American forces, perhaps already suspecting who led them. As the Iraqi night erupted with gunfire and explosions, Donovan's last thought before fully immersing himself in the battle was of his son Michael and the promise he had made to return home. It was a promise he intended to keep, regardless of what lay ahead. All tanks, he commanded, his voice steady and resolute. Prepare to engage and withdraw. We're punching through. The desert darkness bloomed with fire as the American tanks fought for their survival. Outnumbered but not outmatched, their mission now changed from reconnaissance to something far more desperate. A battle for survival against an enemy who knew them all too well. Fire erupted across the desert landscape as the Iraqi patrol vehicles advanced. The night sky, once peaceful under its blanket of stars, now flashed with the brilliant light of explosions and tracer rounds. Inside Iron Resolve, Captain Jack Donovan maintained his composure even as adrenaline surged through his body. Bull, target the command vehicle, Donovan ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. Martinez, prepare for immediate withdrawal once Rodriguez's tank is mobile. Sergeant First Class William Bull Thompson swiveled the turret with practiced efficiency, the thermal sight revealing the heat signature of the Iraqi command vehicle. The crosshairs settled on target. On the way, Bull called out as he depressed the trigger. The Abrams tank shuddered as its 120-meter main gun fired, the massive rounds streaking across the darkness. Through his sight, Bull watched the shell impact the command vehicle, which erupted in a blinding fireball. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition inside the vehicle cooked off. "Target destroyed," Bull reported, already shifting his attention to the next threat. "Rodriguez, status report," Donovan demanded over the platoon radio. "Track damaged but not completely thrown," came the response, tension evident in the tank commander's voice. "Working to restore mobility. Need 3 minutes." "You've got one," Donovan replied. "Wilson, provide covering fire for Rodriguez. Parker, what's your position?" Lieutenant Parker's voice crackled through the radio. "5 clicks east of your position, sir. Heard the engagement. Moving to support." "Negative," Donovan countered immediately. "Maintain your observation post. If we don't make it out, someone needs to deliver the intelligence." There was a brief pause before Parker acknowledged. "Understood, sir. Good luck." Another anti-tank missile streaked from the remaining Iraqi vehicles, narrowly missing Wilson's tank and exploding against the rocky terrain behind them. The American tanks responded with a barrage of fire, their superior targeting systems allowing them to engage with deadly precision even while moving. "Sir, message transmitted," Chen reported from the loader's position. "Headquarters acknowledges receipt. They're requesting we continue observation if possible." Donovan almost laughed at the absurdity of the request. "Inform them that's not an option. We have been compromised and are engaging multiple enemy units." The firefight intensified as more Iraqi vehicles appeared on the horizon. The initial patrol had been relatively light, but reinforcements were clearly on their way from the main force in the valley. Donovan knew they had minutes, perhaps seconds, before they would be facing overwhelming odds. "Rodriguez, time's up," he called. "Mobile or not, we're moving out." "Track repaired enough for movement," Rodriguez responded. "Not combat effective, but we can withdraw." "All units, fall back to Extraction Road Alpha," Donovan ordered. "Martinez, get us moving. Bull, maintain suppressing fire as we withdraw." The massive Abrams tanks began their retreat, moving backward while their main guns continued to engage the approaching Iraqi forces. It was a delicate maneuver requiring perfect coordination between driver and gunner, maintaining accurate fire while navigating treacherous terrain in reverse. As they retreated, Donovan observed the battlefield through his commander's sight. The Iraqi forces were growing in number, but maintaining a cautious approach, perhaps wary of the Abrams' devastating firepower. Their hesitation provided the critical moments needed for the American tanks to reach better defensive positions. "New contact, sir," Bull reported suddenly. "Large heat signatures approaching from the east. Multiple armored vehicles." Donovan's blood ran cold. The eastern approach was their planned extraction route. If enemy forces had positioned there, they could be cut off. "Identify," he ordered, his mind already racing through alternative escape routes. Bull adjusted his thermal sight, focusing on the approaching vehicles. His tense expression suddenly relaxed. "Friendly forces, sir. They're Bradleys and Abrams. Must be the quick reaction force from forward operating base Sigma." Relief washed over Donovan, though he maintained his professional demeanor. "All units, confirm visual identification before engaging. Use recognition signals." The approaching American vehicles flashed their recognition lights, confirming their identity. As they drew closer, Donovan recognized the lead tank as belonging to Captain Richards' company, which had been stationed at FOB Sigma, approximately 20 kilometers to their east. "Thunder 6, this is Hammer 1, Richards' voice came through the radio. "Heard you were having a party and decided to crash it." "Appreciate the gate crashing, Hammer 1, Donovan replied. "We've stirred up a hornet's nest here." "So we see. Fall back through our position. We'll cover your withdrawal." The arrival of Richards' force changed the tactical situation dramatically. The Iraqi units, now facing a larger American force, began to pull back toward their main body. It seemed the immediate crisis had passed. But as Donovan directed his tank through the American lines, a massive explosion erupted to their right. Wilson's tank disappeared in a blinding flash, the turrets separating from the hull and flying 20 feet into the air before crashing back to Earth. "Wilson's hit," Rodriguez shouted over the radio. "Direct hit from the ridge to the north." Donovan swung his optics toward the indicated position and saw what they had all missed. A T-72 tank in a perfect hold-down position, only its turret visible above a small rise. Even as he watched, the enemy tank fired again, the round narrowly missing Rodriguez's already damaged vehicle. "All units, tank destroyer on the northern ridge," Donovan called out. "Bull, engage!" Bull traversed the turret with a lightning speed, acquiring the target and firing in one fluid motion. The sabot round streaked toward the T-72, striking just below the turret ring. The Iraqi tank didn't explode as dramatically as the lighter vehicles had, but a plume of smoke began rising from the open hatches, indicating a fatal hit. "Target destroyed," Bull confirmed grimly. "Check Wilson's tank for survivors," Donovan ordered, though in his heart he knew the chances were slim. A direct hit from a tank round rarely left survivors. Richards's force spread out, establishing a defensive perimeter as Rodriguez maneuvered his damaged tank toward the rally point. Two Bradley fighting vehicles approached Wilson's burning wreck, infantry soldiers dismounting to search for possible survivors. The radio remained silent for long, agonizing minutes before the infantry commander's voice came through. "Thunder 6, this is Hammer 4. No survivors from Wilson's tank." "I'm sorry, sir." Donovan closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. 4 good men lost in an instant. Men with families, with futures, with dreams beyond this desert wasteland. Men under his command, his responsibility. "Understood, Hammer 4. Secure any sensitive materials if possible and prepare to withdraw." The American forces began a coordinated withdrawal toward FOB Sigma, with Richards' tanks providing rear security. As they moved, Donovan processed what had happened. The ambush had been too perfect. The T-72 positioned exactly where it could target American tanks as they withdrew along the most logical route. It spoke of intimate knowledge of American tactics and tendencies. Al-Rashid, his old friend, wasn't commanding from the rear. He was out here directing the battlefield personally, anticipating Donovan's moves like a chess master. This realization sent a chill through him, despite the desert heat. The column reached a position approximately 5 kilometers from where the engagement had begun, when the radio crackled with an urgent transmission from the rearguard. "All units, large enemy force approaching from the west," Richards reported. "Estimate battalion strength or greater. Multiple T-72s with infantry support." Before Donovan could respond, another transmission cut in, this one from Forward Operating Base Sigma itself. "All units in Sector 4 be advised. Massive sandstorm approaching from northwest. ETA 30 minutes. All air support grounded. Repeat, all air support grounded." The timing couldn't have been worse. The Republican Guard force was launching its attack just as the sandstorm would render American air superiority useless. And based on what Donovan had seen in the valley, this was merely the vanguard of a much larger force. "Richards, can your company delay their advance?" Donovan asked. "Affirmative, but not for long against those numbers," came the reply. "We need to reach defensive positions at Sigma before that sandstorm hits." Donovan weighed his options. The intelligence they had gathered was critical. The enemy force was far larger than command had estimated and clearly positioned for a major offensive operation. That information needed to reach headquarters immediately. "Thunder Elements and Hammer Company, fall back to FOB Sigma at best possible speed," he ordered. "Rodriguez, can your tank maintain combat speed?" "Negative, sir. Track damage is limiting us to about 20 kilometers per hour maximum." "Transfer your crew to my tank," Donovan decided. "We'll destroy your vehicle to prevent capture." "With respect, sir, that's against protocol," Rodriguez protested. "We can continue withdrawal at reduced speed." "That's an order, Sergeant. We can't afford to have your tanks slow the entire column, and we can't leave you behind." There was a brief pause before Rodriguez acknowledged. "Yes, sir, beginning crew transfer." As Rodriguez's crew evacuated their disabled vehicle, Donovan directed the placement of thermite grenades on the tank's critical components. The specialized incendiary devices would melt through the engine block and fire control systems, rendering the tank useless to the enemy without the spectacular explosion that conventional demolition would cause. With Rodriguez and his men distributed among the remaining vehicles, the column resumed its withdrawal toward FOB Sigma, pushing their engines to maximum safe output. Behind them, the abandoned Abrams began to glow from within as the thermite did its work, ensuring no usable technology would fall into enemy hands. The western horizon had begun to take on an ominous appearance, a vast wall of dust rising thousands of feet into the air, advancing like a solid entity. The approaching sandstorm would reduce visibility to near zero and clog engines and filters unless the vehicles were properly secured. "All units, estimate 15 minutes until sandstorm impact," Richards updated. "Enemy force continuing to advance, now approximately 3 kilometers behind our position." FOB Sigma appeared in the distance, a collection of fortified positions, barriers, and prefabricated structures surrounded by concertina wire and defensive emplacements. It wasn't designed to withstand a major armored assault, serving primarily as a resupply and coordination point rather than a hardened combat base. As they approached the base, Donovan could see frantic activity, soldiers manning defensive positions, vehicles being moved to create additional barriers, crew-served weapons being emplaced at strategic points. The base commander had obviously received their warning and was preparing for the impending attack. The tank column passed through the base entrance just as the first tendrils of the sandstorm reached them. Fine particles of dust swirled around the vehicles, reducing visibility and creating an otherworldly atmosphere. By the time the last vehicle cleared the perimeter, the storm had intensified dramatically, the air thick with suspended sand that scratched at exposed skin and infiltrated everything not hermetically sealed. Donovan directed his tank to the designated hardpoint near the base's command center, then ordered his crew to shut down the engine and secure all hatches and filters. The other tanks followed suit, their massive forms lined up like sleeping beasts as the storm enveloped the base entirely. Inside the command center, controlled chaos reigned as officers coordinated defensive preparations. Colonel Lewis, the base commander, looked up as Donovan entered, his expression grim. "Captain Donovan, your warning saved us from being completely surprised, but I'm not sure it's going to matter. We're outnumbered at least 3-1, possibly more." "The force we observed in the valley was brigade strength, possibly augmented," Donovan reported, accepting the cup of water offered by a staff officer. "Over 100 armored vehicles, including at least 60 T-72s, plus artillery and air defense." Lewis absorbed this information with a stoic nod. "We've requested reinforcements from division, but with this sandstorm, I wouldn't expect anything for at least 12 hours. We're on our own." Donovan studied the tactical map spread across the command table. FOB Sigma occupied a slight rise in the terrain, providing some natural defensive advantage, but its perimeter was too large for the available forces to defend effectively against a determined armored assault. "Their commander is Colonel Hakim al-Rashid," Donovan said. "He's West Point trained and intimately familiar with our tactics and capabilities." "That explains their exceptional operational security," Lewis remarked. "Intelligence had no idea a force this size was in the area." "Al-Rashid is a master of deception and terrain masking," Donovan explained. "He's using the sandstorm as cover for his attack, just as we would." A communications officer interrupted with an urgent report. "Sir, perimeter sensors are detecting multiple vehicle movements approximately 2 kilometers out, advancing slowly through the storm." "They're coming," Lewis said simply. "All units to battle stations. Captain Donovan, I want you coordinating our armor response. Your experience with this enemy commander could be crucial." Donovan nodded, accepting the responsibility. "I suggest we position our tanks in hold-down positions here and here," he indicated points on the map. "The Abrams thermal sights can penetrate the sandstorm better than anything the Iraqis have. We can engage them before they even know we're there." "Make it happen," Lewis ordered. "And Captain, good hunting." Donovan returned to iron resolve, finding his crew already preparing for combat despite their exhaustion. The sand had infiltrated everything, creating a fine layer of dust over every surface. "Status report," he demanded as he climbed into the commander's position. "All systems operational," Martinez replied from the driver's station. "Filters showing increased resistance from the sand, but within acceptable parameters." "Weapon systems fully functional," Bull added. "Thermal sight is our best friend in this soup." "Ammunition inventory complete," Chen reported. "We have 16 sabot rounds, 14 heat, and 10 canister remaining. Cokes and 50 cal at approximately 60% capacity." Donovan nodded his approval. "We're being positioned as part of the base's armor defense. Our objective is to prevent enemy armor from breaching the perimeter. Martinez, move us to position Delta 3. The tank's turbine engine roared to life, pushing against the howling wind as they maneuvered to their assigned position, a reinforced berm that would provide cover for the hull while allowing the turret full freedom of movement. The other surviving tanks from their original mission, along with Richard's company, took up similar positions around the base perimeter. Despite the sandstorm, the American forces had established a formidable defensive line. Through his thermal sight, Donovan studied the approaching Iraqi forces. The enemy vehicles appeared as bright shapes against the cooler background, their heat signatures impossible to conceal. They were advancing in a classic Soviet-style formation, tanks in the lead, followed by infantry fighting vehicles, with mobile artillery in support positions. "They're being cautious," Bull observed, moving slowly, maintaining tight formation. "They're worried about becoming separated in the storm," Donovan explained. "Al-Rashid knows the risks of advancing in these conditions, But he also knows our air power is neutralized. It's a calculated risk. The Iraqi forces continued their careful approach, now less than a kilometer from the base perimeter. Still, they showed no awareness of the American tanks waiting in ambush positions. All armor units, this is Thunder 6, Donovan transmitted to the defensive force. Hold fire until the lead elements reach the 800-meter marker. Concentrate on command vehicles and tank destroyers first. Acknowledgements came from the other tank commanders as they adjusted their fire control solutions. The tension mounted as the enemy force drew closer, now clearly visible through the swirling sand. The lead T-72s were advancing in a wedge formation, their guns traversing slowly as they searched for targets. 800 meters, Bull announced quietly. Lead vehicles approaching the marker. All units, weapons free, Donovan ordered. Fire at will. The American tanks opened fire simultaneously, their 120-millimeter guns punching through the sandstorm with devastating effect. The lead Iraqi tanks erupted in flames as sabot rounds penetrated their armor with ease. The sudden, coordinated attack created momentary confusion in the Iraqi ranks, vehicles halting or changing direction in an attempt to identify the threat. Target destroyed, Bull reported calmly as his first round found its mark. Switching to next target. Iron Resolve shuddered as the main gun fired again and again, each round finding a target in the advancing enemy formation. The other American tanks were equally effective, their superior fire control systems and thermal sights giving them an overwhelming advantage, despite being outnumbered. The Iraqi force, however, quickly recovered from the initial shock. Return fire began impacting around the American positions, most rounds falling short or wide, but some coming dangerously close. They're ranging our positions, Donovan warned. Martinez, prepare to reposition after the next shot. As if to emphasize his point, an enemy round impacted the berm just in front of their position, showering the tank with dirt and debris. Martinez immediately reversed the tank, moving 20 meters laterally before advancing to a new firing position. The battle intensified as more Iraqi vehicles joined the assault, their sheer numbers beginning to offset the American technological advantage. Donovan watched as one of Richard's tanks took a direct hit to the turret, the crew evacuating amid smoke and flame. Chen, contact command. Request artillery support on these coordinates, Donovan ordered, marking the location of a concentration of enemy vehicles on his tactical display. Artillery is responding, Chen reported moments later. Fire mission incoming. The sound of outgoing artillery was barely audible above the howling sandstorm, but the effects were unmistakable. High explosive rounds began impacting among the Iraqi vehicles, creating havoc in their formation. The precision was limited by the storm conditions, but the volume of fire made accuracy less critical. Despite the pounding they were taking, the Iraqi force continued to advance, showing the discipline and determination that marked elite Republican Guard units. Individual vehicles began to break through the defensive fire, approaching the base perimeter from multiple directions. They're committed to the assault, Donovan observed grimly. This isn't a probing attack. The radio crackled with Colonel Lewis's voice. All units, we have enemy infantry approaching the eastern perimeter. Armor support needed immediately. Thunder 6 acknowledges, Donovan responded, moving to support eastern perimeter. Richards, can your company hold the main approach? Affirmative, Thunder 6. We've got it covered. Donovan directed Martinez to reposition to the eastern sector, where thermal imagery showed Iraqi infantry advancing through the storm, using the limited visibility as cover for their approach. This was the moment when the Abrams' versatility proved its worth. While primarily an anti-armor platform, it was equally effective against infantry with its secondary weapons and specialized ammunition. Load canister, Donovan ordered as they approached the eastern perimeter. Chen swiftly loaded the specialized round, designed specifically for anti-personnel use. Unlike the armor-piercing rounds they had been using, canister effectively turned the 120mm gun into an enormous shotgun, dispersing hundreds of tungsten projectiles in a wide pattern. The Iraqi infantry had reached the outermost defensive wire when Bull acquired them in his thermal sight. Dozens of soldiers were visible, carrying assault rifles and what appeared to be satchel charges, explosives designed to breach the base fortifications. On my mark, Donovan said calmly. 3, 2, 1, fire. The main gun roared and the effect was immediate and devastating. The canister round dispersed across the advancing infantry formation, the tungsten projectiles cutting through the sandstorm and into the tightly grouped soldiers. Thermal imagery showed the heat signatures dropping or scattering as the survivors sought cover. "Reload canister," Donovan ordered. "Martinez, advance 20 meters and prepare for another shot." The tank moved forward, crushing the perimeter wire beneath its treads as it assumed a position directly facing the remaining infantry. A second canister round completed what the first had begun, effectively eliminating the immediate threat to the eastern perimeter. "Eastern perimeter secured," Donovan reported to command, returning to main defensive line. As Iron Resolve turned to rejoin the main battle, a massive explosion rocked the base. Through the swirling sand, Donovan could see flames rising from the northern sector, where a fuel storage area had apparently been hit. "All units, be advised," came an urgent transmission. "Enemy forces have breached the northern perimeter. Bravo Company engaging with small arms and anti-tank weapons." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Despite their initial success in repelling the assault, the sheer number of enemy forces was beginning to tell. The sandstorm, which had initially favored the defenders by neutralizing Iraqi air support and artillery accuracy, was now working against them by making it difficult to coordinate a coherent defense across the entire perimeter. Donovan made a quick decision. "Command, this is Thunder 6. Request permission to form a mobile reaction force with remaining armor assets. We can respond more effectively to breakthrough points than in fixed positions." There was a brief pause before Colonel Lewis responded. "Permission granted, Thunder 6. Coordinate with all operational armor units. Priority is maintaining the integrity of the command center and communications array." "Acknowledged," Donovan replied. "All armor units rally on my position. We're forming a mobile reaction force." The surviving tanks began to converge on Donovan's position, creating a formidable concentration of firepower. Of the original 8 tanks that had started the battle, only 5 remained operational. Donovan's Iron Resolve, 2 from Richard's company, and 2 from the base's own defense force. "Form wedge formation," Donovan ordered as the tanks assembled. "We'll counterattack toward the northern breach, then sweep clockwise around the perimeter, engaging enemy concentrations as we find them." The tank formation moved out, advancing through the base toward the northern sector where the breach had occurred. The sandstorm continued unabated, reducing visibility to mere meters in some areas, but the tank's thermal systems allowed them to navigate and identify targets despite the conditions. As they approached the northern perimeter, the scene that greeted them was chaotic. Iraqi infantry had penetrated approximately 100 meters into the base, engaging in fierce close-quarters combat with American defenders. Several T-72 tanks had also broken through, their main guns firing at hardened positions within the base. "All tanks, weapons free," Donovan ordered. "Engage enemy armor first, then support our infantry against their foot soldiers." The Abrams tanks opened fire almost simultaneously, their rounds streaking toward the Iraqi tanks with deadly accuracy. 3 enemy vehicles were destroyed in the initial volley, the remaining 2 attempting to reverse out of the killing zone. Bull tracked one of the retreating T-72s, leading it slightly to account for its movement. "On the way," he called as he fired. The round caught the Iraqi tank on its side armor, penetrating with devastating effect. The vehicle slewed to a halt, smoke pouring from its hatches. With the immediate armor threat neutralized, the American tanks turned their coaxial machine guns on the Iraqi infantry. The effect was devastating, forcing the enemy soldiers to fall back toward the breach in the perimeter. "They're retreating," Richards reported over the radio. "Should we pursue?" "Negative," Donovan responded. "We maintain the perimeter. Don't get drawn into a potential trap." The American tanks took up blocking positions at the breach, effectively sealing it while combat engineers worked to restore the defensive barriers. The attack on the northern sector appeared to have been contained, but radio reports indicated continued pressure on other parts of the perimeter. "Thunder 6, this is command," Colonel Lewis's voice came through. "We're detecting a large concentration of enemy vehicles massing for another assault, bearing 270 approximately 1 kilometer out." "Acknowledged," Donovan replied, moving to intercept. The tank formation wheeled toward the western perimeter, engines straining against the increasingly difficult conditions. The sandstorm had intensified, fine particles finding their way into every exposed mechanism despite the vehicle's protective measures. "Filter efficiency down to 60%, Martinez reported, concern evident in his voice. "If this keeps up, we'll start losing engine performance." "Noted," Donovan acknowledged grimly. "We'll manage the engines as best we can. Priority remains stopping that western assault." As they approached the western sector, Thermal imagery revealed what they were facing. At least 20 tanks with supporting vehicles, forming up for what appeared to be a major push against the base perimeter. They're committing their reserve, Donovan observed. This is their main effort. The 5 American tanks took up defensive positions along the western approach, their guns trained on the assembling Iraqi force. They were outnumbered at least 4-1, but their position on higher ground and superior targeting systems still gave them a fighting chance. All tanks, establish firing lanes, Donovan ordered. Fire discipline is critical. Make every shot count. The Iraqi force began its advance, moving through the sandstorm with surprising coordination. Their formation suggested experienced leadership, tanks advancing by bounds with mutual supporting fire. That's al-Rashid's direct influence, Donovan noted, recognizing the tactics from discussions years ago at West Point. He's personally directing this assault. The American tanks held their fire until the enemy reached optimal range, then began engaging with methodical precision. Each Abrams selected a target, fired, confirmed destruction, then moved to the next threat. It was a textbook defense, but the sheer number of advancing vehicles meant that some would inevitably break through. Ammunition status, Donovan requested as the battle intensified. 8 sabot, 6 heat remaining, Chen reported. Cokes at 30%. Similar reports came in from the other tanks. All were running dangerously low after the sustained combat. Without resupply, they would soon be unable to continue effective resistance. The Iraqi advance slowed but didn't stop, absorbing losses while continuing to press forward. 2 enemy tanks managed to reach the perimeter defenses, their main guns firing at point-blank range into the American positions. One of Richard's tanks took a direct hit and erupted in flames, its crew bailing out into the swirling sand. Pull back to secondary positions, Donovan ordered. We need to tighten our defensive line. The American tanks began a fighting withdrawal, moving back approximately 200 meters to a prepared defensive line anchored by concrete barriers and anti-tank ditches. This contraction of the perimeter was a tactical necessity, concentrating their remaining firepower and compensating for their dwindling numbers. As they reached the new position, a transmission came through from the command center. All units be advised. UAV imagery from before the sandstorm indicates enemy reinforcements approaching from the northwest. Estimate battalion strength, ETA unknown, but likely within 2 hours. The news hit like a physical blow. They were already stretched to breaking point and now faced the prospect of fresh enemy forces joining the battle before any American reinforcements could arrive. We need to change the equation, Donovan said, almost to himself. Then with more determination, he addressed his crew. Bull, Chen, Martinez, I'm going to propose something to command. I want your input first. What are you thinking, sir? Bull asked, his eyes never leaving his gunner's sight. A counterattack, Donovan stated. Not defensive, but offensive. A strike directly at their command and control. If we can take out al-Rashid and his command group, it might disrupt their entire operation. The crew was silent for a moment, absorbing the audacity of the proposal. That would mean breaking through their lines, Martinez noted, moving deep behind their formation. And we're low on ammunition, Chen added. It would be a one-way mission. Not necessarily, Donovan countered. If we move fast enough and hit hard enough, we could punch through, strike the target, and return before they can reorganize. Bull finally turned from his sight, fixing Donovan with a steady gaze. You know where their command post is, don't you? This isn't just a tactical guess. Donovan nodded slowly. I know how al-Rashid thinks. His command style, his preferences. In this terrain, with these forces, there's only one position that makes sense for his command post. He indicated a point on the tactical map, a small ridge approximately 3 kilometers behind the main Iraqi force, offering good visibility and communications positioning while remaining safely removed from the direct battle area. He'll be there, Donovan said with certainty, directing the battle personally but secure enough to maintain command continuity. Bull studied the map, then nodded. If anyone can find him, it's you, sir. I'm in. We all are, Martinez added, with Chen nodding in agreement. Donovan activated his command radio. Command, this is Thunder 6, requesting authorization for Operation Spearhead, a limited counterattack against enemy command and control elements. There was a long pause before Colonel Lewis responded. Thunder 6, elaborate on your proposal. Donovan outlined his plan. A single tank, his iron resolve, would break through the enemy lines at high speed, bypass their main force, and strike directly at the suspected location of the enemy command post. The remaining American tanks would create a diversionary attack to draw attention away from Donovan's approach. "This is highly unorthodox, Captain," Lewis responded, after considering the proposal, "and extremely high risk." "With respect, sir, our current situation is already high risk," Donovan countered. "If enemy reinforcements arrive before our own, the base will be overrun regardless. This gives us a chance to disrupt their command structure and possibly force them to withdraw." Another long pause followed. "Very well, Captain. Authorization granted for Operation Spearhead. God be with you." "Thank you, sir," Donovan replied. "We'll move out immediately. Request the diversionary attack commence in exactly 15 minutes. "Confirmed. 15 minutes." Donovan turned to his crew, his expression resolute. "Check all systems. Maximum fuel. Confirm ammunition count. We hit them hard and fast, then extract immediately. No heroics, no extended engagement." As the crew prepared for the mission, Donovan found himself thinking about Al-Rashid again. Their last meeting had been in 1980 at an international military conference in London. Al-Rashid had already risen to prominence in the Iraqi military, his tactical brilliance recognized even by Saddam's regime, despite Al-Rashid's known reservations about some of the dictator's policies. "You seem troubled, my friend," Al-Rashid had said during a private moment away from the conference sessions. "Things are changing between our countries," Donovan had replied. "The political climate is shifting." Al-Rashid had nodded solemnly. "In my country, one does not always have the luxury of choosing one's battles. Sometimes survival means serving even those leaders with whom you disagree. Would you ever refuse if the order was wrong?" Al-Rashid's expression had turned guarded. "Such questions can be dangerous, Jack. But know this, I serve Iraq, not any individual. My country, my people, these are my true allegiance." They had parted with a formal handshake, both aware that their next meeting might be across a battlefield rather than a conference table. Now that prophetic concern had become reality. Donovan was about to launch a direct attack against his former friend, a man he had once admired and respected. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a grim determination to complete the mission and protect his own forces. "All systems operational," Martinez reported, breaking into Donovan's thoughts. "Engine temperature normal despite the sand. Fuel at 82% capacity. Weapon systems functional," Bull added. "Thermal sight calibrated for current conditions. Ammunition confirmed." Chen completed the status report. 8 sabot, 6 heat, 3 canister, cokes and 50 cal at 30 and 40% respectively. Donovan nodded his approval. "Comms check with diversionary force." Chen established communication with Richards, who would be leading the remaining tanks in the diversionary attack. "Channel secure, sir. Richards standing by." "Richards, this is Donovan. Confirmed timing for diversionary attack." "Confirmed for 0930 exactly," Richards replied. "We'll give them hell, sir." "Make it convincing, but preserve your forces," Donovan instructed. "This isn't a suicide mission for either of us." "Understood, sir. Good hunting." Donovan checked his watch. 3 minutes until the diversionary attack would begin. He took a moment to address his crew one final time. "Gentlemen, what we're attempting is unprecedented in modern armored warfare. A single tank striking deep behind enemy lines to decapitate their command structure. The risk is extreme, but so is the potential reward. If we succeed, we save this base and possibly hundreds of American lives." He paused, looking at each man in turn. Bull, his mentor's friend, and his own trusted right hand. Martinez, the skilled driver whose hands would guide them through enemy fire. Chen, the brilliant young engineer who had found his calling in the brotherhood of the Tank Corps. "It has been my greatest honor to serve with each of you," Donovan continued. "Whatever happens in the next hour, know that your actions today exemplify the highest traditions of the United States Army." The men nodded solemnly, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the moment and the bond that had formed between them through shared danger. 1 minute to diversionary attack, Chen reported. Donovan settled into his commander's position, securing his helmet and ensuring his communications were functioning properly. "Martinez, plot your course through Sector 4-6. That's their weakest point based on their deployment pattern." "Plotted and confirmed, sir." "Bull, primary targets will be any vehicles directly in our path. Ignore peripheral threats unless they present immediate danger." "Understood, sir." "Chen, monitor our communications and keep the command net open. If we succeed in locating the enemy command post, we'll need to relay that information immediately." "Yes, sir." The seconds ticked down to 0. Precisely on schedule, the sound of multiple tank guns firing in rapid succession came from the western perimeter. The diversionary attack had begun. Execute Operation Spearhead, Donovan ordered. Maximum speed, Martinez. The Abrams turbine engine roared as Martinez pushed it to full power, the massive tank surging forward with surprising agility for its size. They crashed through the base's western perimeter barriers at a point slightly north of the main engagement, the tank's momentum carrying it through the obstacle with minimal loss of speed. The sandstorm actually worked in their favor now, reducing visibility for the Iraqi forces and masking their approach. Iron Resolve tore across the open ground between the base perimeter and the enemy lines, its speed making it a difficult target even as Iraqi gunners began to notice the lone tank charging their position. Enemy tank, 2 o'clock, Bull reported, traversing the turret to engage. Take it, Donovan authorized. The main gun fired. The sabot round destroying the T-72 before it could bring its own weapon to bear. Two more enemy tanks appeared through the swirling sand, both attempting to target the rapidly moving American vehicle. Hold fire, Donovan ordered. Evade only unless they block our direct path. Martinez executed a series of rapid course changes, the tank weaving between enemy positions without slowing its forward momentum. Occasional rounds impacted nearby as Iraqi gunners attempted to track them, but the combination of speed, evasive action, and limited visibility frustrated their efforts. We're through their forward line, Martinez reported, his voice tense with concentration. Approaching their second echelon. The second line of Iraqi forces was more dispersed, primarily infantry fighting vehicles and support elements rather than main battle tanks. Several opened fire as Iron Resolve approached, machine gun rounds pinging harmlessly off the Abrams' heavy armor. Use the cokes to suppress, Donovan directed. Maintain course and speed. Bull engaged with the coaxial machine gun, spraying the enemy positions with suppressive fire without expending precious main gun ammunition. The Iraqi vehicles scattered, unable to coordinate an effective response to the unexpected breakthrough. Final barrier approaching, Martinez warned. Mobile anti-aircraft battery directly in our path. The ZSU-23-4 Shilka anti-aircraft system loomed ahead, its quad 23mm cannons depressing to engage the approaching tank. While primarily designed for air defense, the rapid-firing weapon could be devastatingly effective against light armor and personnel. Heat round, Donovan ordered immediately. Take it out before it can bring those cannons to bear. Chen loaded the high-explosive anti-tank round with practiced efficiency. Bull acquired the target and fired in one fluid motion. The heat round struck the lightly armored vehicle directly in its weapon mount, causing a catastrophic explosion as the ammunition cooked off. Target destroyed, Bull confirmed as they roared past the burning wreckage. We're clear of their main defensive line, Martinez reported. Open ground ahead to the suspected command post location. Donovan scanned the terrain through his commander's sight. The sandstorm was beginning to abate slightly, visibility improving to perhaps 200 meters. In the distance, he could make out the ridge he had identified as al-Rashid's likely command position. Adjust course 035 degrees, he ordered. Maintain maximum speed. The tank thundered across the desert, throwing up a massive plume of sand behind it. They had achieved complete surprise, breaking through the Iraqi lines before an effective response could be organized. Now they had perhaps minutes before enemy forces would begin pursuing them. As they approached the ridge, Donovan's thermal sight revealed several vehicles positioned in a defensive formation around what appeared to be a command and communications center, a modified BTR-60 armored personnel carrier with extended antenna arrays. That's it, Donovan confirmed. Al-Rashid's command post. Range 900 meters and closing. Multiple defensive positions, Bull reported. 2 T-72s, several BMPs, infantry with anti-tank weapons. Focus on the tanks first, then the command vehicle, Donovan directed. Martinez, maintain speed until we reach the 500-meter mark, then execute evasive pattern delta. The Iraqi defenders had spotted them now, the 2 T-72 tanks moving to blocking positions while the BMPs began laying down suppressive fire. Anti-tank teams scrambled to prepare their weapons. Range 700 meters, Bull announced, his hands steady on the fire controls. First target acquired. Fire when ready, Donovan authorized. The main gun roared, sending a sabot round downrange with devastating accuracy. The lead T-72 erupted in flames, its turret lifting slightly from the hull as internal ammunition began to detonate. Target destroyed, Bull confirmed, already shifting to the second tank. Second target acquired. Another sabot round found its mark, striking the second T-72 in the vulnerable joint between turret and hull. The Iraqi tank slewed to a halt, smoke pouring from its hatches. 500 meters, Martinez called out, executing evasive pattern. The Abrams tank began a series of sharp, unpredictable maneuvers, making it nearly impossible for the remaining defenders to establish a firing solution. The BMPs continued their fire, 30-millimeter rounds occasionally striking the American tank, but failing to penetrate its superior armor. Command vehicle in sight, Donovan reported. Bull prepared to engage with heat round. Heat loaded, Chen confirmed. Bull trained the main gun on the modified BTR-60, compensating for their own movement with practiced skill. Target acquired. Fire, Donovan ordered. The tank shuddered as the main gun fired, the heat round streaking toward the command vehicle. It struck with precision, penetrating the lighter armor and detonating inside. The BTR-60 didn't explode dramatically but began burning intensely. Communications equipment destroyed and any occupants almost certainly killed or incapacitated. Direct hit, Bull confirmed. Command vehicle neutralized. As they closed to within 200 meters of the position, Donovan scrutinized the scene through his thermal sight, looking for any sign of al-Rashid. Several figures were visible moving away from the burning command vehicle, seeking cover among the surrounding terrain features. Multiple personnel evacuating the command post, Donovan reported. Martinez, bring us to position Alpha for better observation. The tank maneuvered to a position offering improved visibility of the entire command area. The remaining Iraqi defenders were in disarray, their command structure disrupted, and primary defensive weapons destroyed. Donovan focused his sight on a group of figures moving toward a secondary vehicle, a UAZ-469 utility truck positioned slightly behind the main command post. One figure stood out, taller than the others, moving with an authoritative bearing that commanded respect even in crisis. That's him, Donovan said with certainty. Al-Rashid. Bull traversed the turret, bringing the main gun to bear on the group. Target acquired, awaiting orders. Donovan hesitated for a crucial second. This was Al-Rashid, not just an enemy commander, but a man he had once called friend. A man with whom he had shared meals, debates, hopes for their respective military careers. A man who, in another reality, might still be an ally rather than an adversary. In that moment of hesitation, Al-Rashid looked directly toward the American tank, as if sensing Donovan's presence across the battlefield. Even through the thermal sight, there seemed to be a moment of recognition, of acknowledgement between old friends now divided by war. Sir, Bull prompted, finger poised on the trigger. Orders? Donovan made his decision, guided not by personal history but by his duty as an American officer. Fire. The main gun roared one final time, sending its lethal projectile toward the group around the utility vehicle. The round struck just as Al-Rashid and his staff were boarding, creating an explosion that engulfed the entire area. Target destroyed, Bull reported, his voice subdued. Donovan continued to watch through his sight, searching for any sign of survivors. But the thermal bloom from the explosion obscured detailed observation. Whether Al-Rashid had survived was impossible to determine with certainty. Primary mission accomplished, Donovan stated formally. Command structure neutralized. Martinez, initiate extraction, route Charlie. The Abrams tank wheeled around, beginning its withdrawal from the enemy position. They had achieved their objective, striking deep behind enemy lines and disrupting the Iraqi command and control network. Now came the equally dangerous task of returning to friendly lines. Enemy forces responding, Chen reported, monitoring radio transmissions. Multiple units converging on our position. Expected, Donovan acknowledged. Martinez, maximum speed. Bull, engage only immediate threats. We need to conserve our remaining ammunition. The tank accelerated across the desert, retracing their path toward the American defensive perimeter. Behind them, Iraqi forces were attempting to organize a pursuit, but the destruction of their command post had created confusion in their ranks. Units moved without coordination, sometimes working at cross purposes as local commanders tried to assert control. Sir, radio transmission from base, Chen reported suddenly. Colonel Lewis reports the enemy assault is faltering, units withdrawing from multiple sectors. A surge of hope went through Donovan. Their gamble had paid off. The decapitation strike against the enemy command had disrupted the entire Iraqi offensive. Without Al-Rashid's coordinating presence, the complex assault had begun to disintegrate. Relay our status, Donovan ordered. Returning to base with minimal ammunition, request supporting fire as we approach friendly lines. The extraction route took them through less densely defended territory, avoiding the main concentrations of Iraqi forces. Still, they encountered occasional resistance, mostly isolated vehicles or infantry groups that bull engaged with the coaxial machine gun to conserve main gun ammunition. As they approached the American perimeter, friendly artillery began laying down suppressive fire to cover their approach. The remaining tanks from the diversionary force moved forward to establish a corridor through which Iron Resolve could return safely. Home base in sight, Martinez reported, relief evident in his voice despite his professional demeanor. They passed through the defensive line and back into the base perimeter, the massive tank finally coming to rest near the command center. As the engine wound down, Donovan allowed himself to feel the full weight of exhaustion that had been held at bay by adrenaline and focus. Colonel Lewis approached as Donovan and his crew emerged from the tank. The base commander's uniform was dusty and smoke-stained, evidence of his personal involvement in the defense. "Captain Donovan," Lewis greeted him with a formal salute, "your mission appears to have been successful. The enemy force is in full retreat across all sectors." Donovan returned the salute. "Thank you, sir. Any word on enemy casualties or captures?" "Nothing definitive yet. We've taken several prisoners, but no high-ranking officers so far." Lewis studied Donovan's expression. "You're wondering about al-Rashid?" "Yes, sir. We struck his command post directly, but confirmation of his status was impossible under the circumstances." Lewis nodded understanding. "Intelligence will debrief you and your crew fully. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." As Lewis moved away to continue coordinating the base defense, Donovan turned to his exhausted crew. "Bull, Martinez, Chen, exceptional work today. Get food, water, and rest. Debrief in 3 hours." The men acknowledged the order and began to disperse, the bonds between them stronger than ever after their shared ordeal. Donovan remained alone beside Iron Resolve, his hand resting on the sand-scoured armor plating that had carried them through impossible odds. His thoughts returned to al-Rashid and their last exchange at that London conference years ago. "If we ever meet in battle," al-Rashid had said, "know that it is not personal, my friend. It is simply the path our nations have set us upon." "Let's hope it never comes to that," Donovan had replied. But it had come to that, and Donovan had made the decision his duty required. Whether al-Rashid had survived remained unknown, a question that might never be fully answered in the chaos of war. As the sandstorm finally began to clear, revealing a sky turning to dusk, Donovan allowed himself a moment of reflection. The day's battle had been won, but the war continued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new consequences. For now, though, his men were safe, their mission accomplished, their duty fulfilled. That would have to be enough. The morning after their daring strike against the enemy command post, FOB Sigma stirred with renewed activity. The sandstorm had finally dissipated, leaving behind a transformed landscape of shifted dunes and buried equipment. American flags snapped in the brisk wind as soldiers worked to restore order to their defensive positions. Captain Jack Donovan stood atop the command center, surveying the terrain through binoculars. The distant horizon showed no sign of enemy movement, but experience had taught him that appearances in desert warfare could be deceptive. Beside him, Colonel Lewis studied a newly arrived intelligence report. "Aerial reconnaissance confirms a general withdrawal of Iraqi forces from our sector," Lewis said, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. "Your strike against their command post seems to have had the desired effect." Donovan nodded, still scanning the horizon. "Any confirmation on al-Rashid?" "Nothing definitive," Lewis replied. "Radio intercepts indicate significant disruption in their command structure. Some communications refer to a commander down, but without specifics." The uncertainty weighed on Donovan. Military necessity had dictated his actions, but the thought that he might have killed a man who had once been his friend left a hollow feeling in his chest. "Your debrief with intelligence is scheduled for 1100 hours, Lewis continued. "After that, Division wants you and your crew back at main headquarters for a full operational review." "My crew deserves rest first," Donovan said firmly. Lewis smiled slightly. "Already arranged. You'll move out tomorrow morning. Today, your only responsibilities are the intelligence debrief and equipment maintenance." "Thank you, sir." "No, Captain," Lewis said seriously. "Thank you. Your actions yesterday saved this base and hundreds of American lives." As Lewis departed, Donovan remained on the observation post, his thoughts turning to his tank crew. They had performed beyond all reasonable expectations, maintaining discipline and effectiveness through conditions that would have broken less cohesive units. He owed them more than he could express. The intelligence debrief was thorough but largely procedural. Donovan and his crew recounted every detail of their mission, from the initial reconnaissance to the breakthrough and strike against the enemy command post. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in the layout of al-Rashid's headquarters and any observations about the Republican Guard force structure. Based on your observations, Captain, would you say the enemy force was preparing for a larger offensive beyond the attack on Phobos Sigma? One of the intelligence officers asked. Without question, Donovan confirmed, the force deployment we observed was consistent with the lead elements of a major armored thrust. Phobos Sigma would have been just the first objective. And in your assessment, how crucial was Colonel al-Rashid to their operational effectiveness? Donovan considered his answer carefully. Al-Rashid was trained in American military doctrine. He understood our tactics, equipment, and procedures better than any other Iraqi commander. His loss or incapacitation would significantly degrade their combat effectiveness, particularly against American forces. The questioning continued for over 2 hours before the intelligence team finally seemed satisfied. As Donovan and his crew were dismissed, a communications officer approached with a message. Captain Donovan, secure transmission from division headquarters. General Mitchell requests you contact him immediately. Donovan acknowledged the message and made his way to the secure communications center. General Robert Mitchell was the divisional commander, a legendary figure known for his direct involvement with frontline units. A request for immediate contact was unusual. In the communications center, Donovan was quickly connected to the general's secure line. Captain Donovan, this is General Mitchell. Yes, sir. Captain Donovan reporting as requested. Hell of a job at Phobos Sigma, Captain. Your counterstroke against the enemy command was textbook audacity. Exactly the kind of initiative we need from our officers. Thank you, sir. My crew deserves the credit. They'll get it, rest assured, but that's not why I'm calling. The general's tone shifted slightly. We've received some intelligence you should be aware of. Prisoner interrogations and signal intercepts suggest Colonel al-Rashid survived the attack on his command post. Donovan felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. Professional disappointment at failing to neutralize a key enemy commander, but also an undeniable relief that he hadn't killed his former friend. The reports indicate he was wounded but evacuated before your shell impacted the primary target, Mitchell continued. He's reportedly been transported to Baghdad for medical treatment. Understood, sir. Thank you for the information. There's more, Captain. Before the attack, we intercepted communications suggesting al-Rashid had been asking about you specifically. He knew you were in the theater and apparently had been tracking your unit's movements. This revelation sent a chill through Donovan. Sir, that suggests a security breach in our communications or intelligence channels. That's one possibility, Mitchell agreed. Or it could be that al-Rashid simply remembered your tactical preferences from your academy days and recognized your handiwork. Either way, I wanted you to know. I appreciate that, sir. One last thing, Donovan. Division is recommending you and your crew for the Silver Star. Your actions yesterday exemplify the highest traditions of the United States Army. Thank you, sir. It's an honor. After the call ended, Donovan stood motionless for a long moment, processing the information. Al-Rashid had survived. The thought brought a confusing mixture of professional frustration and personal relief. Their strange dance across the battlefield was not yet complete. Leaving the communications center, Donovan sought out his crew. They had gathered near Iron Resolve, already beginning the painstaking process of maintenance that would restore the battle-damaged tank to operational condition. Bull Thompson looked up from where he was inspecting the main gun barrel for heat warping. Everything okay, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost, Sergeant. Just received word from Division. Al-Rashid survived the attack. The crew exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond to this news or how their commander felt about it. Intelligence says he was wounded but evacuated before our shell hit the primary target, Donovan continued. He's reportedly in Baghdad now. Bull studied Donovan's expression. That bothering you, sir, that he made it out? Donovan considered the question honestly. Professionally speaking, yes. He's a dangerous adversary who will likely return to the battlefield. Personally, well, he paused, searching for the right words. It's complicated. War usually is, sir, Bull replied simply, especially when you know the man on the other side. There's something else, Donovan added. General Mitchell just informed me that Division is recommending all of us for the Silver Star. This news broke the tension, bringing genuine smiles to the exhausted faces of his crew. Chen, the youngest, looked particularly moved. That's something to write home about, Martinez said, grinning. My father will finally believe all those stories I've been telling him. You've earned it, Donovan told him sincerely. Every one of you performed beyond all expectations yesterday. It's been the greatest honor of my career to serve with you. The moment of camaraderie was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching helicopters. Looking up, they saw a flight of UH-60 Blackhawks appearing on the horizon, heading directly for FOB Sigma. "Looks like our ride might be arriving early," Bull observed. One of Colonel Lewis's aides approached at a jog. "Captain Donovan, Colonel Lewis requests your presence at the landing zone immediately. VIP arrival inbound." Donovan acknowledged the message and turned to his crew. "Continue maintenance operations. I'll return shortly." At the hastily prepared landing zone, Donovan found Colonel Lewis standing at attention as the lead helicopter touched down. The side door opened to reveal a familiar figure in desert camouflage with General's stars on his collar. "Attention," Lewis called out as General Mitchell himself stepped from the aircraft. The general returned their salutes crisply, then approached with outstretched hand. "Colonel Lewis, impressive work holding this base against superior forces." "Thank you, sir. It was a team effort." Lewis gestured toward Donovan. Captain Donovan's initiative was the turning point. Mitchell turned his attention to Donovan. "Captain, good to finally meet in person." "Likewise, sir." "Walk with me," Mitchell instructed, moving away from the helicopters. Once they were out of earshot of others, he continued, "I decided to deliver the next piece of information personally. It's sensitive." Donovan waited attentively as Mitchell pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "This was intercepted by Signals Intelligence 2 hours ago. It's a personal message from Colonel al-Rashid, transmitted on a frequency he knew we would be monitoring." Mitchell handed the paper to Donovan. "It's addressed to you." Donovan unfolded the paper, immediately recognizing a code phrase he and al-Rashid had created during their academy days. The message was brief but clear. "The game is not finished, the queen has moved, but the king remains. Until our next match, old friend." "He's confirming he survived," Donovan said quietly, "and suggesting this isn't over between us." Mitchell nodded. "Intelligence believes this indicates al-Rashid may seek personal involvement in operations against American forces, specifically where you might be deployed. Or it could simply be acknowledgement between two professionals," Donovan suggested. "A reminder that we both survived this encounter." "Perhaps," Mitchell conceded. "Either way, I thought you should know. This conflict is evolving rapidly, Captain. The ground war may be approaching its conclusion sooner than originally anticipated." This was news to Donovan. "Sir, the Iraqi forces are in general retreat across all fronts. Their most elite units, including al-Rashid's Republican Guard Brigade, have suffered heavy casualties and equipment losses. Baghdad is beginning to make diplomatic overtures through third parties." "That's good news, sir." "It is," Mitchell agreed, "but war's end brings its own complications. The political landscape is shifting. Some of our objectives are changing." He fixed Donovan with a significant look, "including how we view certain enemy commanders." Donovan grasped the implication immediately. "Al-Rashid is being evaluated as a potential asset post-conflict?" "I can't comment specifically, Captain, but I will say that military officers with Western training and moderate political views might be valuable in a reconstructed Iraqi military, assuming certain regime changes occur." The conversation was interrupted by an aide approaching with an urgent message for the general. Mitchell excused himself, leaving Donovan to consider these new developments. If Mitchell's hints were accurate, al-Rashid might soon transition from enemy to potential ally. The thought was disorienting after the intensity of their battlefield confrontation. War created clear lines that peace often blurred. Donovan carefully folded al-Rashid's message and tucked it into his pocket. Whatever the future held, this chapter of their strange relationship remained unfinished. Returning to his crew, Donovan found them completing the essential maintenance on Iron Resolve. The tank bore the scars of its recent battles proudly, its armor pitted and scored by enemy fire, but its vital systems intact. "General Mitchell brought news," Donovan informed them. "The war may be winding down. Iraqi forces are in general retreat across all fronts." The men absorbed this information with the measured reaction of experienced soldiers. There was relief, certainly, but also wariness born of having heard similar optimistic assessments before. "Does that mean we're heading home soon, sir?" Chen asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "Not immediately," Donovan replied honestly, "but perhaps sooner than we expected. For now, our orders are to return to division headquarters tomorrow. After that, we'll see." As evening approached, Donovan sought a moment of solitude on the base perimeter. The western sky blazed with the spectacular colors of a desert sunset, oranges and purples painting the vast expanse above the horizon. The beauty stood in stark contrast to the violence that had unfolded in this same landscape just hours earlier. Bull Thompson approached quietly, joining him in contemplation of the sunset. "Quite a view," the sergeant remarked after a moment. "It is," Donovan agreed. "Makes you wonder why humans insist on spoiling such beautiful places with war." Bull nodded thoughtfully. "Your old man used to say something similar in Vietnam. Said it was a crime to ruin paradise with our fighting." Donovan glanced at his longtime companion. "You never talk much about your time with my father." "Some things are hard to put into words," Bull replied. "Your father was a good man. The best tank commander I ever served under, until you." "High praise." "Just truth, sir." Bull seemed to be considering his next words carefully. "There's something I never told you about that last day in Khe Sanh." Donovan tensed slightly. His father's death had left wounds that had never fully healed, questions that had never been fully answered. "Your father could have pulled back," Bull continued. "The position was untenable. Everyone knew it. But there was a platoon of infantry cut off beyond our lines. He refused to withdraw while those boys were still out there." "He went to rescue them?" Donovan asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Led the mission himself. Got them out too. Every last one. It was on the way back that we hit the ambush." Bull's voice remained steady, but his eyes reflected old pain. "Last thing he said to me, while we were taking fire from all sides, was tell Jack the price was worth paying." Donovan felt his throat constrict. All these years he had known his father died a hero, but the specific circumstances had remained shrouded in military reports and the reluctance of survivors to revisit painful memories. "Thank you for telling me," he managed finally. "Seemed like the right time," Bull replied. "After what we just went through, some things need to be said while there's still chance to say them." The two men stood in companionable silence as darkness claimed the desert. Stars appeared in the vast sky above, countless points of light in the infinite blackness. Tomorrow would bring new orders, new missions, new challenges. But for this moment, there was only the desert, the stars, and the bond between warriors. The return to division headquarters the following day was uneventful. The tank crew was greeted with newfound respect from their peers, the story of their daring strike behind enemy lines having spread throughout the American forces. Senior officers who had previously paid little attention to Donovan now acknowledged him in passing, a subtle but noticeable shift in status. 3 days of debriefings, equipment servicing, and administrative processing followed. On the 4th day, Donovan was summoned to the headquarters of General Mitchell himself, an imposing structure that had once been an Iraqi military facility before being repurposed by American forces. The general's aide escorted Donovan into a spacious office where Mitchell sat behind a desk covered with maps and reports. To Donovan's surprise, another figure was present, a CIA officer he recognized from previous intelligence briefings. "Captain Donovan," Mitchell greeted him. "You know Mr. Anderson from the agency." "Sir, Mr. Anderson." Donovan acknowledged them both with appropriate formality. "Please sit down," Mitchell invited. "What we're about to discuss is classified at the highest levels." Donovan took the offered seat, his curiosity piqued, but his expression remaining professionally neutral. "As you know, the ground war is approaching its conclusion," Mitchell began. "Iraqi forces are in full retreat, and diplomatic efforts to formalize a ceasefire are advancing rapidly." "That's good news, sir." "It is," Mitchell agreed, "but it also presents new challenges. The post-war political landscape in Iraq will be complex and volatile. We need to ensure stability while allowing for necessary changes in leadership." Anderson, the CIA officer, leaned forward. "What the general is saying, Captain, is that we're already looking beyond the combat phase to the reconstruction and stabilization phases. For that, we need reliable partners within the existing Iraqi power structure." Donovan understood immediately where this was heading. "Colonel al-Rashid," Anderson nodded. "Precisely. Our assessment indicates al-Rashid commands significant respect within the Iraqi military. He's seen as professionally competent but not politically aligned with Saddam's inner circle. That makes him potentially valuable in a transitional military structure." "And you want my input because of my history with him," Donovan surmised. "More than input, Captain," Mitchell corrected. "We're considering a direct approach to al-Rashid, exploring his willingness to cooperate in post-conflict stabilization. Given your previous relationship, you're uniquely positioned to make that approach." The request caught Donovan off guard. After facing al-Rashid across the battlefield, after ordering the strike that had apparently wounded him, he was now being asked to approach his former friend as a potential ally. "This would be completely voluntary," Anderson clarified, "and highly confidential. Only those with a direct need to know would be aware of the operation." Donovan considered the proposal carefully. What exactly would this approach entail? A face-to-face meeting in neutral territory, Anderson explained. Probably Jordan or Turkey. Basic diplomatic protection would be arranged through intermediaries. Your role would be to establish initial contact, assess al-Rashid's position and intentions, and determine his potential willingness to cooperate with post-conflict stability operations. And if he refuses, Donovan asked, then you part ways, no harm done, Mitchell answered. This isn't an arrest or extraction mission, Captain. It's a diplomatic overture with military implications. Donovan fell silent, weighing the request against his own conflicted feelings about al-Rashid. The Iraqi officer had been both friend and enemy, a complex figure whose true loyalties remained uncertain. May I have some time to consider this request, sir? He asked finally. 24 hours, Mitchell replied. After that, we'll need to pursue alternative approaches if you decline. Understood, sir. As Donovan left the headquarters building, his mind churned with conflicting thoughts. The proposal represented an extraordinary shift from combat operations to something approaching clandestine diplomacy, a role for which he had no training and questionable suitability. Yet there was also something fitting about the possibility of reconnecting with al-Rashid in a context that wasn't defined by conflict. Their friendship had been genuine once. Perhaps it could serve a greater purpose now. Returning to the barracks area, Donovan found Bull Thompson cleaning his personal sidearm, a ritual the sergeant performed with near-religious dedication. Everything okay, sir? Bull asked, noticing Donovan's preoccupied expression. You look like a man carrying a heavy load. Just some complicated new orders to consider, Donovan replied, not yet ready to share the classified proposal. The kind that make you question where duty really lies. Bull nodded, understanding. Those are the worst kind, when there's no clear right answer, just different shades of gray. Exactly that, Donovan agreed, grateful for the sergeant's perceptive nature. How do you handle those situations, Bull? Bull considered the question as he reassembled his pistol with practiced movements. My grandfather was a preacher back in Louisiana. He used to say that when your mind can't decide, let your heart lead. It might not always choose the easiest path, but it'll be the one you can live with. The simple wisdom resonated with Donovan. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He was, Bull confirmed. Also the worst fisherman in 3 parishes, but nobody's perfect. The moment of levity helped clear Donovan's mind. By morning, he had reached his decision. 24 hours after his meeting with General Mitchell, Donovan returned to the headquarters building. The general and Anderson were waiting in the same office, expressions expectant. I'll do it, Donovan stated without preamble. On one condition. Mitchell raised an eyebrow, which is, Bull Thompson accompanies me. He's my right hand, my most trusted NCO. If this goes sideways, there's no one I'd rather have watching my back. Anderson frowned slightly. This complicates the operational security. Each additional person increases risk of exposure. Sergeant Thompson has the highest security clearance for his rank, Donovan countered. And his presence would be natural if we're portraying this as a military liaison meeting, which I assume is the cover story. Mitchell and Anderson exchanged glances before the general nodded. Agreed. Sergeant Thompson can accompany you. We'll begin preparations immediately. The next week passed in a blur of specialized briefings, cover story development, and logistical arrangements. The mission was classified at the highest levels, with only a handful of people aware of its true purpose. To most observers, Donovan and Bull were simply being reassigned to a military liaison role in Jordan, a common enough occurrence in the complex coalition that had formed around the Gulf War. The operation was scheduled to commence in 48 hours when Donovan received unexpected news. His scheduled satellite call with his son Michael had been moved up by request from his brother Dave. In the communications center, Donovan waited anxiously as the connection was established. When the video link finally activated, he was surprised to see both his son and his brother on the screen. Michael, Dave, he greeted them, immediately concerned by their solemn expressions. What's happened? Dad, Michael began, his teenage face unusually serious. Uncle Dave and I have been talking. About you, about Grandpa, about everything. Donovan glanced at his brother, who offered a small, encouraging nod to the boy. I've been a jerk, Michael continued frankly. All this attitude about the military, about your deployment, it wasn't fair. You're entitled to your opinion, son, Donovan replied carefully. No, Dad, I was being a kid. Uncle Dave helped me understand some things. Michael glanced at his uncle before continuing. He showed me Grandpa's letters from Vietnam, the ones he wrote to Grandma. Donovan was momentarily speechless. Those letters were deeply personal accounts of his father's experiences, his fears, his hopes for his family's future. Dave had safeguarded them for decades, rarely sharing them even within the family. "We've had our differences about politics, Jack," Dave interjected, "about wars and who fights them and why. Those differences are real, but they're nothing compared to what matters." Michael needed to understand who his grandfather was, who his father is. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Michael said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "Whatever you're doing over there, I know it's important. I know you're doing it for the right reasons." The simple declaration hit Donovan with unexpected force. Throughout his military career, he had sought to live up to his father's legacy, to honor his sacrifice. Somehow, amid that pursuit, he had forgotten that creating his own legacy with his son was equally important. "Thank you," he managed finally. "Both of you, that means more than you know." The conversation continued for several minutes, touching on Michael's basketball season, Dave's work, everyday matters that suddenly seemed precious in their normalcy. When the time came to end the call, Donovan found himself reluctant to disconnect. "I should be home soon," he told them. "Things are winding down here." "Just come back safe," Michael said. "That's all that matters." After the call ended, Donovan sat alone in the communications center, processing the unexpected emotional impact of the conversation. His upcoming mission now carried additional weight. He was no longer risking only himself, but also the renewed relationship with his son. Bull Thompson found him still sitting there 20 minutes later. "Everything okay, sir? Heard you had a call with your boy." "Better than okay, Bull. Something's changed. Michael, Dave, they seem to have found some common ground, some understanding." Bull smiled knowingly. "Family has a way of coming together when one of their own is in harm's way. Makes people reconsider what really matters." "I suppose it does," Donovan agreed. "Makes you think about what's worth fighting for, too." "Always good to have clarity on that before heading into uncertain territory," Bull observed sagely. "Speaking of which, our transport to Jordan is confirmed for 0600 tomorrow. Everything's in place." The operation proceeded according to plan. Donovan and Bull traveled to Amman, Jordan, where they established themselves in the cover role of military liaison officers coordinating coalition drawdown procedures. The actual meeting with al-Rashid was arranged through intermediaries, a complex dance of diplomatic and intelligence channels that eventually produced a time and location. The designated meeting place was a private dining room in a discreet restaurant favored by diplomatic personnel, a neutral space where two military officers from opposing sides might meet without attracting undue attention. Donovan arrived alone as planned, while Bull maintained watch from an inconspicuous position outside. The room was small but elegantly appointed, with a single table set for two and soft lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. Donovan had just taken his seat when the door opened. Colonel Hakim al-Rashid entered, moving with the careful deliberation of someone nursing recent injuries. He wore civilian clothes, a well-tailored suit that couldn't quite conceal the medical brace around his torso. His face showed new lines of pain and experience, but his eyes remained as sharp and intelligent as Donovan remembered. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then al-Rashid smiled slightly. "Hello, Jack. It seems we have both survived to play another round." "Hakim," Donovan acknowledged, rising to his feet. "You're looking well, considering the circumstances." "3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a concussion," al-Rashid replied matter-of-factly. "Your aim remains impeccable." "Not impeccable enough, apparently." Al-Rashid's smile widened. "Providence, perhaps, or fate, if you prefer. Please sit." They took their seats across from each other, the weight of recent events hanging between them. A waiter appeared briefly with water and wine before discreetly withdrawing. "So," al-Rashid began, pouring himself water while declining the wine, "the Americans wish to discuss the future. My future specifically." "You know why I'm here, then?" "Your intelligence services are not as subtle as they believe themselves to be," al-Rashid replied. "Several approaches have been made to various Iraqi officers through various channels. It was only a matter of time before someone thought to use our connection." "And what do you think of these approaches?" Donovan asked, watching his old friend carefully. Al-Rashid considered the question. "I think your government is preparing for what comes after. Saddam's days are numbered, whether he realizes it or not. The question is what follows his inevitable fall, and who shapes that future." "And where do you stand in that equation?" "Where I have always stood, Jack, with Iraq. Not its dictator, not its temporary regime, but the nation itself, its people." Al-Rashid's expression hardened slightly. "But understand this, I will never be anyone's puppet, American or otherwise." Donovan nodded. It was exactly the response he had expected. "No one is asking you to be. What's being suggested is cooperation toward stability, toward preventing Iraq from collapsing into chaos once this conflict ends. A noble goal, al-Rashid acknowledged, but complicated by many factors: sectarian divisions, regional powers, the personal ambitions of men who see opportunity in disorder. All the more reason for professional military officers to provide steady leadership during transition, Donovan countered. Al-Rashid studied him for a long moment. You truly believe that's why your government wants my cooperation? Not for intelligence on military capabilities, not for leverage against the regime, but for stability? I believe it's part of the reason. Politics always has multiple layers, Hakeem. You know that as well as I do. Indeed. Al-Rashid sipped his water thoughtfully. Let us set aside politics for a moment. Tell me about the battle at FOB Sigma. Your counterattack against my command post was brilliantly executed. I would like to hear your perspective on the engagement. The conversation shifted to professional military discussion, both men analyzing the recent battle with the detached precision of experienced officers. They dissected tactics, noted missed opportunities, acknowledged effective maneuvers. It was reminiscent of their academy days, when they would spend hours deconstructing historical battles in theoretical scenarios. As they spoke, the tension between them gradually eased. They were no longer opponents but colleagues, united by their shared profession and its unique perspectives. Your gunner is exceptional, Al-Rashid commented. 3 of my tanks were destroyed with first-round hits at extended range during movement in a sandstorm. Remarkable shooting. Sergeant Thompson, Donovan confirmed. He's the best I've ever seen. The same Thompson who served with your father in Vietnam? Donovan was momentarily surprised by Al-Rashid's knowledge of this detail. Yes, the very same. Your father was a significant influence on your military career, Al-Rashid observed, as was mine on me, though in a different way. My father was a school teacher who believed education could transform our nation. The military was never his preference for me. You never mentioned that before, Donovan noted. There were many things we didn't share during our academy days, Al-Rashid replied. The political realities of our countries made certain topics inadvisable. The conversation paused as their meal arrived, a traditional Jordanian spread that neither man paid much attention to despite its excellent preparation. What happens now, Hakeem, Donovan asked finally. After this meeting, after this war, where does your path lead? Al-Rashid's expression turned contemplative. In the short term, I will return to Iraq. My wounds have provided a convenient excuse to remain away from active command, which gives me certain freedom of movement and association. Beyond that, he spread his hands in a gesture of uncertainty. Much depends on how events unfold. Saddam's grip is weakening, but he remains dangerous. Those who position themselves as alternatives often meet unfortunate ends. And yet someone must step forward if change is to come. Indeed, Al-Rashid leaned forward slightly. Let me be direct, Jack. I am willing to engage in limited cooperation with American authorities regarding post-conflict stabilization. However, I will not be party to any action that compromises Iraq's sovereignty or dignity as a nation. My loyalty remains to my country, not to any foreign power or domestic tyrant. It was exactly the position Donovan had anticipated. Al-Rashid was offering enough to satisfy the immediate American objectives while maintaining his independence and principles. I understand, Donovan replied, and I believe my superiors will as well. Good. Al-Rashid sat back, seeming satisfied with the understanding they had reached. Now tell me about your son, Michael, correct? He must be a teenager now. The remainder of their meeting shifted to personal matters, family, memories, the paths their lives had taken since their academy days. It was a strange juxtaposition, discussing children and careers mere days after trying to kill each other on the battlefield. Yet there was something appropriate about it too, a recognition that they were more than just soldiers, more than just representatives of opposing forces. As their meeting concluded, Al-Rashid produced a small wooden box from his jacket pocket. A gift. Open it once we've parted. Donovan accepted the box with a nod of thanks. Will we meet again, Hakeem? I suspect our paths will cross again, one way or another, Al-Rashid replied. The world is changing rapidly. Old adversaries become new allies. Former friends find themselves on opposite sides. It is the nature of our profession. They shook hands formally, 2 officers acknowledging mutual respect despite the conflict that had placed them on opposite sides. Until next time, my friend, Al-Rashid said. Until next time, Donovan echoed. Al-Rashid departed first, moving with the careful dignity of a man unwilling to show pain despite his injuries. Donovan remained at the table, the small wooden box resting untouched before him. After several minutes, he finally opened it. Inside lay a chess piece, a white knight, intricately carved from ivory. A small note accompanied it. The knight moves in unexpected ways, neither directly forward nor sideways, but finding paths others cannot see. You played your knight well in our recent game. Perhaps in our next match, we will be on the same side of the board. Donovan carefully returned the piece to its box, understanding the layers of meaning in the gift. It was acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps a subtle message about al-Rashid's own intentions moving forward. Outside the restaurant, Bull Thompson waited with professional patience. "How'd it go, sir?" "About as expected," Donovan replied. "He'll cooperate, within limits. His primary loyalty remains to Iraq, not to Saddam or to us." Bull nodded. "Can't fault a man for putting his country first. That's what we do too, when you strip away all the politics." "True enough," Donovan agreed. Their mission complete, they returned to their temporary quarters to prepare for extraction back to their unit. The report Donovan would deliver to General Mitchell was already taking shape in his mind, measured, factual, but ultimately positive regarding al-Rashid's potential role in post-conflict stabilization. 2 days later, they were back with their unit, reintegrated into the regular command structure as if their special mission had never occurred. The war was indeed winding down, with ceasefire negotiations progressing and combat operations largely suspended. Iron Resolve remained operational, but the crew's days were now occupied with maintenance, training, and preparation for eventual withdrawal rather than combat operations. It was a welcome change of pace, though the transition from the intensity of battle to the routine of peacetime duty created its own challenges. One evening, as sunset painted the desert sky with brilliant colors, Donovan found himself once again standing on the perimeter of their base, contemplating the strange journey that had brought him to this point. The war was ending. He had faced his old friend across the battlefield and then across a negotiating table. Soon he would be returning home to rebuild his relationship with his son and brother. Bull Thompson joined him, as he often did during these evening reflections. They stood in companionable silence for several minutes before Bull spoke. "Word came down today, sir. We're scheduled for rotation back to the States in 2 weeks. Looks like we're going home." Donovan nodded, absorbing the news. "The crew?" "Already celebrating," Bull confirmed with a slight smile. "Chen's talking about nothing but holding his baby daughter. Martinez is planning some elaborate homecoming for his wife." "Good," Donovan said sincerely. "They deserve it. All of you do." "As do you, sir." Bull studied him carefully. "You thinking about your old friend?" "Among other things," Donovan admitted. "Wondering what happens to men like us when the fighting stops. Do we ever really leave the battlefield behind? Or does it become part of us, something we carry forever?" Bull considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "My grandfather, who I mentioned before, he fought in World War I. Terrible stuff, trenches, yeah, the whole nightmare. He told me once that the fighting stops when they sign the papers, but the war ends when you make your peace with it. Some men never do. Others find a way." "And your grandfather?" "He found his way," Bull said. "Through his faith, through his family, through building something that mattered to him. Said the memories never went away, but they lost their power to hurt him." Donovan nodded, finding wisdom in the simple explanation. "Your grandfather seems to have had an answer for everything." "Not everything," Bull replied with a small smile. "Never could tell you why the fish wouldn't bite when he took me fishing. Blamed it on my city boy presence scaring them away." The moment of levity was welcome, a reminder that life continued beyond war, with all its small joys and ordinary concerns. As darkness fell over the desert, Donovan reflected on the chapter that was closing and the one about to begin. The battlefield had tested him, had forced him to confront the complex intersection of duty, friendship, and personal history. He had emerged changed but intact, carrying new wisdom and perspective back to the life that awaited him at home. In 2 weeks, he would be leaving this desert behind, returning to his family, to the son who had found new understanding of his father's path. The war would end officially with signed documents and political statements, but for Donovan and countless others who had fought here, the process of truly ending it would continue long after. That was the nature of war. Its start was clear and definitive, marked by declarations and first shots fired. But its ending was gradual, personal, a slow transition back to the rhythms of peace. For some, that transition would come easily. For others, it would be a lifelong journey. 2 weeks, Donovan said finally. Time to start thinking about home. Bull nodded agreement. Yes, sir, time to go home. The two men turned away from the darkening horizon, walking back toward the lights of the base where their crew awaited. Behind them, stars began to appear in the vast desert sky, eternal witnesses to the conflicts of men and the peace that eventually followed. In the Arlington Military Museum, Colonel Jack Donovan, now 67, finished his story. The gathered veterans sat in respectful silence, absorbing the tale of courage, conflict, and unexpected connection across battle lines. Al-Rashid and I met twice more after that, Donovan concluded. Once during the Reconstruction period, once many years later in London. He never achieved the position of influence some had envisioned for him. Saddam's fall took longer than expected. And by then, the political landscape had changed dramatically. But he remained true to his principles, advocating for his country's sovereignty while working quietly for its eventual liberation from dictatorship. And your son? One of the veterans asked. A smile crossed Donovan's weathered face. Michael found his own path. Not the military, he became a teacher, then a principal, making his own difference in the world. We found our way back to each other after the war. That was perhaps the most important victory of all. Donovan's hand moved to his pocket, where a small wooden box contained a white knight chess piece, carried with him through the decades as a reminder of the strange bonds formed in war and the unexpected paths that lead from battlefield to peace. The official record states that we encountered enemy armor and prevailed against superior numbers, he said, echoing his opening words. And that's true, as far as it goes. But the full story, as you've heard, is more complex. War always is. It tests not just our courage or our tactical skill, but our humanity, our capacity to recognize ourselves in our enemies and to find a way back to peace when the fighting ends. The gathered veterans nodded in understanding. They had each carried their own stories from distant battlefields, each found their own paths back to civilian life. In sharing these experiences, something essential was preserved, not just the tactical details or historical facts, but the human dimension of warfare, with all its complexity and contradiction. As the evening concluded and the veterans prepared to depart, Donovan remained by the display case containing the tattered American flag. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had journeyed far beyond the desert battlefields of his youth, carrying the lessons of that time into a life lived with purpose and integrity. The museum would preserve the artifacts of war, the tanks, the weapons, the flags and medals. But the true legacy of those who fought lay in how they carried their experiences forward, how they transformed the crucible of combat into wisdom that guided them through the longer, quieter battles of peace. For Jack Donovan, that journey had led him here, to this moment of reflection and connection, sharing a story that official records would never capture, but that contained truths essential to understanding the full measure of war and the men who waged it.